Okay, I think it's so. Right, so good afternoon, everybody. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Hamera Sultan. I'm a public health consultant and the director of our Future Parks programme. So thank you to everybody who is popping who they are in the chat. We've got a lot of people here today, which is fantastic. So I'm going to start off by screen sharing our presentation that we've put together. So a massive thank you to Tamsin and Debbie, who've put a huge amount of thought and effort into this. You know, we've got a fantastic team in FPA, and yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the session, everybody. If I just do a screen share. If somebody can just shout once they can see this, that would be great. It's just loading up, folks.
I can see that.
Brill, thank you. I think that was Councillor O'Shea. Thank you. Okay, so kind of moving through really. So the whole point of this presentation and this presentation, it's a workshop really, because we want people to talk to us, we want people to tell us what you think. But really we want to start setting out a potential structure really of some of the key things that we think are needed to be able to move us more and more closer to a City of Nature roundtable and or alliance, and we'll talk about some of the differences between those two things later. Just in terms of a bit of a, you know, what have you said to us so far and how have we responded to that? So what we heard at the last conversation that we had back in June, people did feel that the vision that we set out for the City of Nature felt right, which was great, and there was very much consensus about wanting to work together to achieve that. So we sent out an expression of interest. We've had one come in this morning, so I think we're at 6 expressions of interest received now. I don't have permission from everyone to share what we've been told, but I won't really talk about it really in kind of detailed terms, but we have got quite a range of interest being shared, a range of interest being expressed in terms of different levels of support and different kinds of support. So one organisation wanting to be kind of very much more focused around helping to activate spaces, another more about how helping to integrate volunteering, you know, others that are more interested in contributing rather than leading. So that's great, and we've got a real mix, and I will be writing to everybody after this meeting that have sent an EOI just to say if you're happy for this to be shared. We've compiled it all into one spreadsheet, but I wanted to make sure that was okay before we did that more formally. We've had a definite, we don't want a new organisation, we don't want a new structure or a Parks Foundation. So instead you were thinking, well, actually, if we're going to have an alliance, what does that actually look like? So you've also said that the whole idea of structure, governance and ways of working, you want some clarity on that. So what we've done in response to that is put together this conversation, which Tamsin's worked really hard on, and we've put out some ideas and approaches to get your feedback on that. And you know, we've also heard about money, resource as well. So resource not just about money, it's about time and people as well. You know, we've heard that fundraising is important, and also that we also need funds to be able to kind of provide action at the grassroots level. So Hannah's here today from the Commonwealth Games team. Kat Orchard couldn't be here today because of annual leave, but Hannah's a close colleague of hers, and one of the reasons that Hannah is here is this whole conversation is being made possible because the Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund is supporting this. So we have 150k to start off with, and we've got some ideas on how we're going to use this potentially for your input as well, and that will all feature part of this conversation today. I just really wanted to share a few stories with you first. So We have embarked upon this whole mission of collecting Earth stories as part of our Future Parks work. I can't take much credit for this. Debbie, who is in the virtual room, has done an astounding job together with other colleagues of ours in FPA, Dan Lloyd, we've had some students, Adrian Spray from CFP, been a massive team effort in asking the population of Birmingham to share their stories about nature with us. We've had people submit poems, we've had people submit blogs, we've had people submit videos. What you can see here are paintings and photographs. And there's also, yeah, absolutely, Debbie, you know, the hard work was actually done by the groups. Absolutely, thank you. But in terms of being able to capture that, you know, the conversations are happening. And we have this mantra in FPA that we're trying to make the invisible visible. So all these stories are being shared, all these conversations are happening, but we're just not very good at capturing them or finding a way to get to them. And what we've shown now through this process, it is possible. We've incentivised a number of community groups to help support us. And we've got 150 Earth stories back now, and more are coming. And the level of diversity that we have seen in those responses, mainly because we've targeted those groups that work with those diverse communities, we've never seen before in terms of working with, in terms of getting views, responses, ideas from those who use nature, use our parks, use our green spaces. So, you know, I think just under half of our 150 Earth stories were from people under the age of 40. Over half were actually from non-white British ethnic minority groups as well. And we don't get that kind of level usually. So we had a big challenge from the FPA board given to us at the end of last year, saying you need to find a better way of capturing diverse voices, and I think we've done some of that. So I'm going to attempt to play a conversation from a young boy. I'm just going to see if this works, folks. Just bear with me, and if I can ask someone to let me know if they can actually hear this. Did anybody hear a young boy speaking yet? Okay.
Nothing from here, sorry.
Apologies, folks, for the mixed kind of responses that we've had to that. Some people could hear it, others couldn't. I'm not sure why, but we are going to circulate all these slides, so you will be able to actually hear the recording as well. But essentially, just for those who missed it, it's about a young boy living in the north of the city who throughout, talked about basically before lockdown, didn't really experience nature much, was out with his mates in town and kind of, listened to music or kind of going out shopping. And then suddenly discovers, when he said he discovered a local park, I was expecting him to say maybe, I don't know, Perry Common or Witten Lakes. Not that there's anything wrong with those parks. I love them both dearly, but it was Sutton Park, a national nature reserve that he stumbled across. And I think for me, what's really powerful about this story is that he during lockdown, it's really changed the way in which this young man has understood nature, connected with it, and importantly, got his friends to engage with it as well. And this is what we're trying to do in this programme. We are trying to make it as easy as possible for people to know nature, love nature, and then want to protect it, I guess. So thanks for your patience there, folks. Apologies for those that couldn't hear anything, but I think most people could. I'm just really going to introduce, go back to kind of where we started from in the conversation last time, just so that everybody's kind of back on the same page. This whole idea of environmental justice, that we know that there are parts of the city in Birmingham, those areas especially that are in red, and those red wards there right in the middle of the city, where environmental justice is an issue. Those areas have higher risks of flooding. They're generally known as urban heat islands. Access to green space is an issue, and also they tend to be areas where there is greater levels of excess years life loss, so people are dying earlier than they actually should be in those areas. And one of those particular areas that we're looking at is Bawdsley and Highgate Ward. And what the point of showing you this is that we want this is about action. It's not just about talking, and it's about trying to get something tangible done in those parts of the city where more action is needed. Birmingham is a huge city. We can't tackle it all at once, but we have to start somewhere. Bawdsley and Highgate is already an area of interest because it's within our East Birmingham growth corridor, so already there's a lot of work going on. I think from a council perspective around making this about regenerating the area. From a green space perspective as well, it has 5 POS, public open space sites. It did used to have 6. This area that I'm highlighting here at the moment, so it was called St Luke's, but that's now become housing. You'll see these kind of areas here that kind of have like red lines. These are areas where potentially extra housing is being considered as well. But this is an area really where, if I just fast forward, sorry, I haven't actually got the main slide. That would have been really helpful. Sorry, folks. But when we look at this particular area, we know it doesn't have enough green space for the population. It's something at 0.62 per 1,000 people. We really should be at 2 hectares per 1,000 people. It's also an area relatively high deprivation as well. We don't have as many skilled young adults, especially when you look at kind of attainment from school in this particular area. Unemployment is low as well, and also health and wellbeing issues health and wellbeing is an issue as well for the area. So when we kind of think about, when you look at one site at a time, and this is really what we're talking about in this programme, is we're trying to tackle the green space sites within each of these wards that are red. And the idea is that by focusing the effort around the green space site and the areas around the green space site as well, we'll have grass verges and other housing land and so forth. But what we're trying to do with council officers is get them to look at these sites and think, okay, from our particular areas of expertise or our areas of responsibility, what could we actually do in these particular sites? From an education perspective, from a children's trust perspective, from a public health perspective, from transport, inclusive growth, and so forth. So what we want to have is a bit of a parallel conversation with organisations like yourselves, who are very active in the community space, to see actually, well, what could the collaborative effort be from City of Nature Alliance? So if we look at this particular slide here, it looks at Highgate Park in particular, and we would like to move this from a basic to a better, potentially to best. We might not get to best for quite a while, but we'd really like to move it from basic to better. And when you look at this slide, what you'll see are these words and boxes, just green, health, engage, and value. And these buzzwords, should we say, are making up an environmental justice audit. So the team are working on the details of that at the moment, but what we're doing is very much the idea is that we look at each site through these 5 different lenses. So, you know, how fair is that site in terms of what it provides? So does it have access to, does it have good quality access for the population? Does it offer play, recreation facilities? What level of maintenance is it getting at the moment? From a green perspective, so one of the key measures here is tree coverage. From a well-being perspective, we've used a tool called Greenkeeper to kind of to model potential impacts in terms of well-being and physical health. We've looked at the level of engagement in that in the audit as well. So as far as we're aware, there's no actual community groups that are working or activating this particular site. And we think there's about 20,000 annual visits as well. And if you were to move this to a better, you know, if you kind of follow the slide through, the more you were to invest in this particular site, if you look at the value at the bottom, so in terms of benefits, that should go up as well. So I gave Tamsin a challenge to kind of help me with a jigsaw slide, really. And at the moment, and this is very much happening within the council, I would say, from a green space perspective, and also outside of the council. There's a big picture here that we're all trying to work towards. We're trying to make our citizens healthier, happier, and you know, that's the reason why every council officer comes into work, is to make a better is for a better Birmingham. But the problem is, I guess the picture isn't that clear, really. And at the moment, it's a bit like having a jigsaw. You've got different pieces of the jigsaw trying to fit together, but at the moment, the pieces don't really fit in a coherent way because we're not working in a collaborative way for one kind of outcome. And I would say as well, from a City of Nature Alliance perspective, the pieces are there. There is so much activity going on by groups like yourselves all over Birmingham. But what we haven't done is really, I guess, give a clear direction or give a clear focus. So the bits of the jigsaw don't really fit together that well. However, what we want to get to is this perfectly fitting jigsaw piece where the aim is clear, the direction is clear, and the outcome is clear. And for us, what we're saying at the moment is we would like to bring Highgate Park from basic to better. And we've got some ideas on how we go about doing that. So if I can ask you to keep that in your mind. And absolutely, Simon, yes, we will share these slides afterwards. So Debbie, I'm a minute over, I think, but Debbie's going to talk for about 15-ish minutes on just around kind of a volunteering vision for the City of Nature Alliance. As I said right at the beginning, this is one of the things that's really driving our FPA programme, and is one of the reasons Casey's been working so hard with us as well on this piece of work together with Joe Hayden and Steve Hinton. So Debbie, if I can pass over to you, I'll go on mute, but I'll still do the slides for you if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I want to go quickly through these because I think having as much time as possible for people to feedback, ask questions and comment. So it's just a little bit of an overview of the journey that we've been on, and we're by no means finished, but I think we're getting there, and it's all coming together and making a lot more sense, especially thinking about those earlier slides. So really for us, there were two things that we were looking at making a difference around: providing and promoting volunteering that's attractive to everyone was the sort of phrase, but that came out as providing more opportunities in different ways and having a more diverse volunteering work, pool of people. And that's kind of the way that we're looking at things now, having being aware of the people that want to engage with us and thinking about all of the kinds of opportunities and how we might be able to promote those, deliver them as wide as possible. So we've done a lot of work with National Trust and Casey, and these are sort of the main points that stuck out to me from some of the work that we did in the rapid prototyping workshops. Was the vision of the National Trust right at the end, that our 2020 vision, really those 2 points became sort of a very much focus of what we were looking at. And I really like this idea of volunteers involved in every aspect of our work. Could you just click for me, Hamira? Sorry. Oh, it's okay. Never mind. Go back. Go back. I don't know why it didn't bring it in, but sorry. Go to the next slide. That's okay. So volunteers involved in every aspect of our work, and all our staff confident and capable of working with volunteers, became the focus of what we were doing. And I really liked this everyday participation. And those 7 aspects in that red box, some of them we found we were already doing and it tied in with it. And some of that focused us even more. So telling stories, gathering data, sharing connections, contributing ideas, giving time, learning skills, and crowdfunding innovation became part of the bigger picture. So volunteering is very much part of it, but it changes the way we think about what we mean by volunteering, to being more holistic in that these are people who aren't paid to be involved with green spaces and participating in them. Volunteering in the traditional sense is just one part of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we know, and I'm not going to read through all the words on here because I want to get through as quickly as possible, but basically we know that there's already a lot of great work going on in the city around volunteering. Birmingham Open Spaces Forum, 130 groups. We know those are different. Sometimes they're big groups, sometimes it's a few people, but we don't know for sure who those people are, who the individual volunteers are, and that was one of the things we wanted to think about. We also knew that there were areas of the city that were less represented than others for volunteering that's visible to us, and actually that coincides, not completely but strongly, with those red wards again. We know that, so obviously Birmingham Open Spaces Forum is there to help those groups. We have the Park Ranger Service, but they have very limited capacity, especially while they've been dealing with COVID. And they tend to be based at the hubs, which are Lickey Hills, Sutton Park, Woodgate Valley, Kings Heath and Sheldon. And there again, if you look at a map with their sphere of influence on it, it misses out those red wards a lot of the time as well. Although there is support, it isn't as great as closer into those hubs. And obviously we're aware that there are the national and local other organisations. 2 models that we've got, if we just look at trees, we have Birmingham Trees for Life, who just brings volunteers together at the time at which tree planting takes place. And currently in that model, there is often no contact outside that moment in time. And those individual volunteers are often not known to Birmingham Trees for Life because they're organised by group leaders or schools. The Birmingham Tree people have got kind of the other end of the scale in that it's all about individual tree wardens. So there's a bigger group that is Birmingham Tree people, but individually it's tree wardens who are all trained up and registered as individuals and work on their own under the guidance of Birmingham Tree people. Next slide, please. And their work, both of them actually, involve young people as well. Birmingham Trees for Life involves a lot of tree planting with schools. Hundreds of children come out and plant trees every year. But as I say, are we missing an opportunity there? Is there something missing in both of those models? Next slide, please. We've also been looking at volunteer development coordinators. We've got 2 at the moment, based with Birmingham Open Spaces Forum, one in Dorbury Fields Park, one in Ward End Park. Very different parks. Wonderful information coming back from both Helen and Freddie that are working on that for us, understanding the dynamics of a park like Dorbury Fields, that when we went there had very little going on. Again, apparently, we search hard, we do miss things sometimes, but it had become very quiet. Even before COVID, there wasn't a lot going on there. Ward End Park, lots of things going on, but not really collaboratively. So happening at the same time in the same space, but not a lot of connectivity between that, even on one park. They've been looking at the Track It app, which we'll talk about a bit more, and looking at those different volunteering models. So Ward End Park, you know, Freddie has done a great job getting to know everyone. And people have said to him, not everybody wants to become part of a group. Are they still a friend of the park if they don't sign up to the group? And Freddie's expression is, if you're not an enemy of the park, you're a friend of the park. But a really strong friends group has been there and done fantastic work and has been regenerated again and is going from strength to strength. Dorbury is just an active group at the moment. So Helen is leading them doing activities, but they are getting stronger and stronger all the time and keener to form a more formal group. So again, we can see these different models, even within parks, that are happening, but aren't coordinated and aren't necessarily formalised in any way. Next slide, please. So that brings us to, we need to know more about what's going on. And there has been lots of investigation into volunteering and volunteering data, especially through the NHS. There's been a lot of work done through the NHS as well. But across all of this research, it was discovered that the key aims for both government and voluntary community sector are to ensure that volunteering is accessible to everyone and to increase the diversity of volunteer involvement. So you can see that all this national research brings us back to those first 2 aims of the project. So we know that every time we check something, these same wants and needs are appearing, and the same solution is also coming out. Next slide, please. And that's around capturing the data and understanding what is actually going on and who is out there. And with Earth Stories, we realised, the reason we used Earth Stories is we realised there were lots of people involved in green spaces, but they didn't necessarily see themselves as fitting the traditional volunteering model. So they might have litter-picked their park on their own as they were walking through it. They may take a group of friends there to walk. It might not even be a formal walking group, but just some, you know, buddying system where people go out and use it. And we wanted to, again, think about that bigger involvement around volunteering. And as I say, I won't go through all of the words on all the slides because you can read them. But one of the things that came out strongly was that it was felt that monitoring volunteer data required one system to properly store the information and obviously be able to collate it. So we have been monitoring that. We've been, you know, this data is captured by all sorts of people in all sorts of places. Birmingham Open Spaces Forum does a wonderful job, but the Track It Forward app that we've been trialling will hopefully bring all of that together in one place. And that's the important part about it, seeing lots of different types of information in one place. And we'll talk about that a bit more later. Next slide, please.
Debbie, actually some Track It data is actually in the slides now because I got it from Chris just before this meeting. So
oh, brilliant.
I've just popped it in. So shall I just
Yes.
I didn't have time to say to Chris that it's going to be earlier than he can actually join. So, but this is what Chris has shared with us. So a big thank you to BOSIF, who have, agreed to take on that mantle and trial using an app to actually collate some volunteering data. So as you can see right at the top here, there are 132 registered users. Between them, they've actually submitted 281 bits of data, which is very much around what kind of activity they're doing to support that volunteering. And in total, 382 hours have been recorded. And it's mainly been targeted at Friends of Park groups. But, oh, Emma, do you want to come in?
I was just going to say I'm here if there's any questions about it.
Thanks, Emma. So Emma and her team at BOSIF did a fantastic job back in January, really trying to raise awareness of this. And Emma was, just in terms of, these are the list of people, aren't they, the list of groups who took part in trialling the app. But did we get anybody else from outside of Friends of Parks doing that?
Well, I was going to say what I wanted to say is, there's lots of apps out there. So the first job was to identify which was the most useful of the apps. And we ended up on the Track It Forward app. And we're on a kind of basic level. There's additional resources that we would get from it if we decide to use it and use it at a higher level in terms of things like GPS. And we wanted to trial it with a limited number of groups to start with. So that's the groups listed there. But you'll notice the word unknown. So we've also used it for, we put the information out generally through our groups. So those are people who are doing stuff on their own, but they're not attached to any particular groups or sites. So that's particularly, I think, around some of what we call the greening the grey groups. And I think some of the tree people were using it to test it out for themselves. So at this stage, it's being tested by people some of whom are currently have been for many years using a more traditional way of collecting data on who's volunteering and what they're doing. So we've got a mix of those groups, and then we've got a few groups there who've never used the old system and are trialing this one without any experience of the old one. So it's just interesting to see at this stage. No great surprise when you look at the next slides. It continues to reflect the demographics of who we thought our volunteers are, because it's gone out to existing groups. Once we're comfortable with how it works and that we've done a lot of tweaking each time something comes in, I think the aim would be to then publicise it more widely and see whether we pick up other people in terms of the demographics. So the difference for the Track It Forward app over our old process just used postcode as a way of identifying where and what kinds of people across the city. This system collects demographic data when people register. So they do it once. So we're continually collecting data about who's volunteering and how many hours and what they're doing without continually having to ask them the demographic data, which people often found very intrusive. So that's where we've got to with it. And I suppose this is the end of the pilot. Surprise, surprise, women are doing the work. Or should I say women are doing the work and recording it. You never know whether it's the people doing the work or the people recording it from this sort of system. And again, no surprise in terms of ethnicity that it's mainly white people from white backgrounds who are recording it. But that's in the nature of the setup we've got currently, not a reflection on the app itself, I think. So I think this is the beginning, and it is an interesting thing to do, and I think it'd be interesting to see how it develops. There are limitations on it, particularly where there's group volunteering happening, but I think it will be really useful to pick up information about all those people we could never record in the past, which is just the individuals.
Brill. Thanks, Emma. I keep seeing our litter picker John in Swanshurst Park, and I keep wanting to wave this app under his nose each time I see him. I haven't done it yet. I might get pushed in the lake if I do, but yeah, it's fine. I can swim.
I mean, and the thing is, what we want to be able to do is to have a system in the end whereby we can offer individuals like John the app. And if he doesn't have that kind of phone or isn't that interested, equally, I have a very nice man who litter picks every day. He's rehabbing from a stroke. He can't read an app, but I say, well, just text me or just email me how many hours you've done this month. So we've got, like everything that we talk about, there's no one answer for everybody. So it's about being as flexible as we can and responding appropriately. And this is one way to get one group of people who currently we don't get. It might not be the answer for everybody, but then we've got to find a way for all the different bits of data collected to speak to each other. And that's the hard bit.
But this is great, Emma, to get this instant, well, not instant, this first tranche of data back, and just to show what's possible. So if I can just ask people to keep that in their minds, because we'll be coming back to this as well. Debbie, back to you for Green Champions.
I'm glad we fitted that bit in, because it makes it make a lot more sense. So it's all right always talking about collecting data, but it's when you see those bar charts and pie charts that it gets everybody's attention, when it turns into something. So Green Champions program, Green Champions idea, concept. This is where we have come to, starting with that everyday participation and the actions that we've done so far. And I would also say that although it says Green Champions at the top, we've extended it actually to have little Green Champions, which are the children and families where the children are 5 and under, and young Green Champions, which are under 16, mostly school children, but not only school children, families as well. But it's so we've got this tell stories, gather data, share connections, contribute ideas, give time, learn skills, crowdfunding innovation, 7 kind of parts of that everyday participation that really sort of made sense to us, and we took forward through different parts. Not everything is developed yet, so that Earth Stories was the telling the stories, and from a micro level, the individual going to the part telling us the story, we are analysing those stories as well to see what the themes are coming out, so that information actually also supports strategy as we go forward at the macro level. We've got there around gathering data, the Track It app, volunteer relations management, or they're called CRM, but it's sort of volunteer relations management. But all of the data, as Emma said, the data can actually be gathered in any way that you want to, but it's the collating, it's the job of the person who ends up trying to put it all together that becomes harder if you don't use one system. So Helen Rooney in Parks is always on our case all the time, asking us for volunteer. Anybody who works with volunteers in Parks gets an email every month from Helen asking us for the volunteer data. And she does a great job of putting it together, but it doesn't see individuals. So it's mostly about, it does register how many individuals and how much time, but it doesn't know who those individuals are. Sharing connections through social media, newsletters, digital platform, physical notice boards, meetings, coffee mornings like Birmingham Spaces Forum does fantastically, online, at Cottage Park, webinars, and again, working at the micro level, individuals, and at site level, and capacity building by sharing that information and making all of the individuals and groups more able to do things through that information. People's voice, CoN forum, physical and digital meetings, digital ideas boxes. There's a lot of development still to do around that part of it, contributing ideas. We've had community conversations and lots of other set pieces of consultation, but we want to be able to have this everyday participation in consultation, so that the conversations and the backwards and forwards and connections keep going all the time. We've got the traditional volunteering, giving time, friends groups, litter picking, work days at the micro level. Training, skill shares, Green Showcase, where Sophie and the team has been promoting the skills that go with the green jobs that we want to encourage the younger generation to take up, because we'll run out of people otherwise. And different crowdfund ways, or community ways of raising funds for projects at a micro level, which it does happen in all sorts of different places in different ways. And we tried it out at Dorbury Fields Park around the reptile project. So again, it's not that any of these things don't happen anywhere. It's that we don't have a good picture of it. It's not very connected, and it doesn't happen everywhere. And what we want to do is try and make sure that all of the best bits get to all of those red wards. And that's what we're looking at through the Green Champions programme. More people to grow more green champions. So we've got this idea that an individual can help somebody else develop into a green champion just by telling them about it, by skill sharing, having putting a notice up on your notice board that says, do you know about this? Finding out who the people are, getting them involved every day. And Hamira's done an interesting experiment with a WhatsApp group that we put out. So I don't put it out on social media, but because the whole world could join in, but the whole world is joining in, which is the great bit. And maybe we really have got started on this everyday participation as people are signing up to this WhatsApp group to find out what's going on. Maybe not realizing that we're going to ask them to do loads of things, but it's started already, and it's wonderful. I think that might be almost the last slide, or the last slide.
It is.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Emma, for stepping into the to that little. I wasn't really sure what I was going to say for the Track It app, so thank you so much for stepping in there. You've heard a lot of information, folks, and I'm very conscious that we have just bombarded you with a lot. So can I suggest that we just take a really quick 5-minute break? We're a little bit behind schedule, but there was a lot to get through in this bit because we want to do more talking to you in the second half. So if I can ask you to, if you want to take a quick stretch your legs, have a quick cuppa. Yeah, I'm trying to think not saying anything inappropriate given I'm being recorded, but whichever beverage takes your fancy. So, and we'll reconvene. If we can all be back by about 13:54, ready for 13:55 start, and then we'll get into talking to you. So, but before you do go, if I can just go back to one of Debbie's points, what we're presenting is not about a criticism of anything at all. We all recognise the massive value and contribution that everybody on this call brings to green spaces and nature. But if we just quickly, if I can just take you back and dip into your coffee break, this particular picture here, it's about making the pieces fit. And at the moment, that's what we want to help you do, but also have your help with as well. So if you can keep that in mind for when we get to the next stage of the conversation. So see you in 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, thanks, folks. people coming back. Okay, folks. So, right. So, firstly, thank you all for really, listening in and taking the time that you have to kind of hear what we've got to say. So, one of the first things I said at the beginning of this conversation was that this is all about action. And I know FPA has been talking a lot over the last 18 months, really, about what kind of things that we need to be seeing. And now we're really keen to test out how we can actually do things differently in a more collaborative way. We introduced you to this idea of trying to move a particular park within the Highgate Borsley ward from basic better to best. And we'd now, probably between now and about 2:15, we'd really like to have a conversation so people feel comfortable. We've got Park Service colleagues here, we've got RSPB, we've got the Wildlife Trust, we've got Tours, we've got Witton Lodge, we've got Bosworth. Have I missed anybody else off the list? We've got Eco Birmingham as well, Children's Trust. So, wide range of groups presented here. And it'd be really good to hear from all of you about what you think your offer or contribution could be to really helping this park move up the ladder, so to speak. So just to kind of get the conversation started, now I should have some animation on this, and it's not working, sorry. There we go. So from our experience of FPA so far, what are the kind of things that have worked? So we've divided it up into kind of people and place type activities. So the kind of things that have worked. So we've got Children's Trust here, mentoring young people in green spaces, getting young people engaged through Little Green Champions, getting the local community involved in nature through virtual sessions. Rob's been pivotal in getting that sorted. Training up volunteers as well to lead sessions. Very much a thing that Tours is doing at the moment, and also Witton Lodge have tried. From a place perspective, the kind of things that have worked sounds really simple. Having a notice board in a park. Swansea's Park have now ordered our notice boards, and we are excited beyond belief of what we're going to be able to do with those notice boards in our park. Setting up a wildlife campaign. Again, Gareth's here from the Wildlife Trust. Emma Thompson has been instrumental in helping us get that launched. Nearly £2,500 raised. The work for that is about to start. Setting up sensory walks and sensory gardens. That's been really powerful. The communal gardens that we've been developing as well in the south of the city. The tenants who live in that particular part of BCC housing got beside themselves about what they're going to have on their doorstep. And also, from an inclusive growth perspective, we're fully joined up with our planning team around actually making sure that the requirements for green infrastructure are reflected in our big policies, and that work is very much underway, if not nearly complete. So I'm going to bring Debbie in really briefly now, who has done a tour of Highgate Park, can I call it, with her environmental justice audit hat on. Could you just give the group here a bit of a taster, Debbie, of the kind of things that came to mind from when you look at that lens of health, engagement, value, fairness, and involvement? What kind of things came to mind in Highgate, please?
Yeah, well, it's Rupi that's leading the work, but we went out together and with Matt from Parks as well, thinking about the value aspect of it, and Simon Needle looking at the green aspect of it. So we tried to cover those: engaged, green, healthy, value, and fair aspects of the together does that equate to environmental justice? That's what we were thinking about. By no means have all of the separate parts of it been considered, and there is complexity around joining all these things together, just like every part of the project seems to come back to complexity. But just as Hamira said, simple things like, for engaged, is there a notice board? Is there any social media? Has it got a web page on the BCC website? For around networks and outreach, are there any links to existing contacts? Do schools use it? Are other groups using it? User group or friends group? Is there any encouragement going on? Is there a group already or anything underway or going on? So not just formed things. Is there any sign at all of anything happening? And what volunteering opportunities are there? Ranger service, litter picks around the outside of the site, if not on the site. Has another organisation worked with anybody on that site? And we looked at it in a really basic way. So that's like 4 parts. And actually, anybody who does green flag would recognise that those 4 aspects do come under green flag as well. So communication, network, user group, and volunteering opportunities. And we said, what would it be if it was basic? And we said, well managed and 1 of these. If it was better, well managed and 2 of them. For a best one, well managed and all of them. All of this is up for discussion because we're still, considering what should be on the list and how it would work together to add up to something. Under green, we thought about tree canopy, water, biodiversity, soft landscape ratio to hard landscape, connectivity to other green areas, floral enhancement, habitat diversity, carbon footprint. Healthy, walkable paths, outdoor gym, outdoor classes, green gym opportunities, signage, advertising, social prescribing, and then value. This is a nice mathematical calculation. This is a kind of, I suppose, one of the most important bits, because if we can't get this bit right, we might not be able to convince everybody that this is a good thing to do. So in a really basic way, and I don't want to, oversimplify this too much, but how much is the outgoing? And how much is the income? Now, that income could either be benefits to people, or some sites actually do generate income, obviously, from activities on there. So what's the benefit value to health? What's the benefit value to education? Benefit value to livability? Benefit value to skills? And any other incoming? And how does that balance up? So it's a horrible argument, and again, this is at a very, very quick and dirty level, just to get us thinking. If the benefits of the park didn't outweigh the cost of it, is it worth having? I'm talking about natural capital, all the aspects of it. But if you could give those pound notes directly to something else and it doesn't generate more money, is it worth having? What we're aware of, and the bit that we really want to promote, is when you put a pound note into a park, it generates more than a pound. And how much more does it generate? And what do we need to do for it to generate those benefits, the health benefits, the education, livability skills? So we looked at Highgate Park. A lot of it, we also realised when you're standing there, how many people, and again, this is all the really sort of substantial bit that we're looking at now of trying to make this happen, is the people right next to the park might visit it every day. The people in the next sort of ring out might visit it every now and again. But as we learned from Dorbury, the people who actually aren't geographically and definitely still within the ward, in the kind of next ring out, if you can imagine that, sometimes don't even know the park is there. So they're not benefiting from it at all because they don't know it's there. But the placement of those green spaces is the next thing that we want to look at, and all of the rest of the green space. But just working at a site level, that's how we're looking at it at the moment. And actually, Highgate, we looked at it and we said, it actually scores really well, but with a few little, relatively little tweaks to it, and making sure that all of the basic stuff is kept going, you could create a really welcoming, beneficial site, and then the work goes in to connecting the community to it. So, and then that amplifies once you've got that connection to the community and they're happy. Because the reason I would say some sites need work first is because we've had a lot of feedback from people that says, I wouldn't even step foot on that park sometimes. I know that's an over exaggeration, and for anybody from parks, it's a bit of a strong feeling, but we have had young people who do say that because they feel, not because it's the case, but because they feel the park isn't welcoming. They feel the park is not for them and isn't safe. And we were looking very much at when you've got a fence all around a park, and we know why they're there, but when you've got a fence all the way around a park, if for the people who live opposite the gateway, it's much more welcoming than the people who live around the back and all they see is a fence in front of the park. So lots of bits to think about. It makes such a difference when you're actually standing there and you can think about all these criteria and how you could change it. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview how we're approaching it.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. So again, quite a lot of information there, folks. But so if I can just kind of turn to our community partners, as well as a park service as well, you're absolutely part of the City Nature Alliance, our park service. Just from what you've heard so far about the kind of things that we found that works in FPA, the kind of gaps that Debbie's highlighted within the kind of environmental justice audit, does anybody feel brave enough to think about, well, okay, if we weren't to think about any extra resource, but just in terms of your business as usual, as an organisation, be it the Children's Trust, be it TORS, be it BOSIF, be it RSPB, be it Wildlife Trust, Eco Birmingham, Whitton Lodge. I know there's some geographical kind of things as well going on here. You know, Borsley Highgate isn't necessarily in the north of the city where Whitton Lodge operates. But are there particular things that you think you could do now as an organisation to try and help improve this particular park in Borsley and Highgate? Ah, Emma, I was going to say, I don't want to pick on people, but I hope people have some volunteers. So Emma, please, please do go.
Well, it's very obviously under our banner to put some additional effort into bringing the community together and see in what ways they want to be involved in improving and maintaining their space. Normally we respond to groups or individuals' requests rather than going in, because we tend to find that the outcome is more sustainable if the interest has come from the group itself or the community itself. But there's nothing to stop us, and we have done it in the past, turning that around where there's a particular project going on. So we would be happy to contribute to that. Our experience in Dorbury Fields in particular, and to a lesser extent in Ward End Park. So the experience in Dorbury Fields is you can make a real impact by, as my mother would say, throwing some money at it and actually investing in a person whose job it is to make it easier in a community where there aren't natural organisers or people with capacity or time to do it. So with additional funding, you can certainly do more. But in the short term, we'd be very happy to commit some resources to helping the community have a chance to express what they would like and what they would like to be engaged with.
Brill. Sounds like we've entered an auction, Emma. I was going to say, kind of like you've kind of raised the bid now. So any more? I feel like I should be a game show host, and I've just remembered it's being recorded as well, which is great. So, okay, I'm gonna just ask certain organisations to come forward. So Birmingham Children's Trust, I think we've got Alex here, and we've got Sam as well. I think Sam Hall's on the call. Just from what you've heard, Alex, from a Children's Trust perspective, obviously Borsley and Highgate, we would have a lot more data. When we do this properly and we set up an action plan, we'd have a lot more information about the children, the schools, the early year settings and so forth. We'd have information about the number of children in care, So just from a children's trust perspective, is there anything you feel like you could do here as well?
Hi, Mira. Can you hear me okay?
I can, Alex, yeah.
Brilliant, that's fine. No, in terms of something right now, we've got, I was just talking to Sam briefly about, we have one of our sort of apprentices who's a young person, care experienced young person who I know lives that area of the city, about 10 minutes away from Highgate Park. And that person's working in the fostering service, so maybe we could do some sort of kind of marketing thing with her to kind of promote the park and have a look through and kind of create something bespoke to share the kind of positivities around it, maybe, as well as kind of that promotion to our other care leavers in the service.
That's great, Alex. I mean, you know, we want younger people to be using our spaces. I mean, Emma's painted a really clear picture. I know it's limited what the Track It app, you know, who we targeted it at and what came back and so forth. But generally speaking, and again, this is a big drive for us, is to collect that data. But we do need younger people engaged in our green spaces, not just using them. Of course, we want them using, and we know they use them. But it's that ladder almost of you know it, and then if you get to know it, you can start to love it, and then once you love it, there's no issue in protecting it. I often liken it a bit to being a parent, and apologies to those of you on the call who aren't parents, but you know, as someone who loves their child immensely, the overwhelming desire to protect them comes hand in hand. And I have to be, I'm being completely honest, Wandsworth Park is an extension of my body now. It really is. So my family and I, we love it, and that's why we do so much for it, I guess. So and if we can start that linkages, especially in a group of young vulnerable people, Alex, that would be great, I think. So thank you for that offer. I'm sure we can build on that. So and Gareth, I saw your camera go on, so it looked like you meant some business to come and also put a bid in as well.
Yeah, well, so at the Wildlife Trust, our base in the sort of east of the city is at Eco Park in Small Heath, but we have an outreach officer there who's got some flexibility with her time to kind of visit other green spaces and perhaps, you know, deliver some sort of family engagement events, those kind of things. I think particularly if there was a focus day or something like that where we could come and sort of contribute, maybe where there was already a bit of the opportunity to kind of promote the opportunity to local people to get involved, would be able to come along and support that. You know, we're doing quite a lot of BioBlitz activities, so just surveying to see what wildlife there is on any site. So that's something that's always useful to generate data about, as well as kind of involve people. So they're kind of quite fun things to do that I'm sure could be scheduled for a an appropriate time. I think, you know, in terms of kind of practical things, you know, we do have, well, one thing is we have the Growing Local Flora project based at Eco Park, where we take, we gather seeds from local sites, and we grow them on, we propagate them, and the aim is that we can then plant those out in other local spaces. So it could be that there's some sort of complementary planting that we could do, particularly if there were some local people who were already kind of interested in taking part in that. And another model which we've been developing is through, we're running a lot of training courses for young people 16 to 25, and at the moment they're kind of based at Eco Park. But so one of the courses we're doing at the moment is in tool use, but also, as I say, we're doing things like surveying or in the winter sort of coppicing work, that kind of thing. And it could be that, you know, part of that course could be delivered on a space like this, you know, particularly if there's if there was some coordination around what practical work might need doing and for us to be able to kind of, you know, help deliver something that was needed on the site, or just even if it's just the surveying modules, we could do that. We could do a survey or apply a blitz with the groups of young people. So some of these these courses are open to any kind of young people who are interested in getting involved. You know, there'd be a particularly good opportunity if there were young people from that part of the city who wanted to join. But at the moment, they're kind of mainly based at Eco Park, but we could kind of move out from there and deliver at least part of that course on a different site. I think that would be quite exciting thing to do. And I think there's the opportunity to explore a model there of kind of working with groups who are kind of making progress towards a qualification, but at the same time, you know, conducting, you know, doing taking some positive action on their local green spaces. I think the trick for that is just kind of making sure that we're kind of integrated with the management plan for the site, and that the people who are, you know, have the ultimate responsibility for kind of looking after it are kind of happy with us coming and doing some of those kind of activities. But if that can be arranged, then yeah, I'm sure we could work.
That's a great offer. Thank you, Gareth. So we've hit 2:15 and we should be going into the next part of the agenda, but if we just spend a few minutes, folks, anything from tours or RSPB, Whitton Lodge, Eco Birmingham that you want to, this won't be the last time that we speak to you, but if you wanted to come in with anything, just to kind of give us an idea of what could be. Michelle's put her camera on, so.
Yeah, I was just going to follow on from Gareth to say, similarly, if it was around sort of events and activities and community engagement work as well, so looking at co-design and the types of programmes and activities people might be interested in participating in the local green spaces, that's something we could probably support with, as well as some of the intervention arms like you've put on the slides, sensory walks or walking groups. So we could definitely be part of, whether it's around the engagement or actually some of the delivery side of it as well, and understanding local need. I don't know if there's anyone who's engaging with the schools. I used to be a governor at Percy Shermer, and that's just a school that's void of any green space on the actual school site. So I wonder if there's a piece, speaking to Gareth's point, around some of the activity and engagement with families as well, around like is anyone working with that school to connect them to the green spaces in their local area?
That would be part of the more officer group work that we've been looking at as well, Michelle. But absolutely, it's a really good point. You know, hopefully we've got a connector from the education team, and then we could charge them with actually, right, these are the schools, we need to try and get some conversations with them and so forth. So absolutely. Yeah. And there's no reason then why that join up couldn't happen. That's fab. Rob's hand went up, and then Natalie, please.
Hi, Hamira. So we're lodged to deliver our services in a fairly fixed geography, which obviously this falls outside of. But I think we are open to doing things wider around the city, perhaps in terms of, say, buddying or mentoring, sharing skills. So we did something similar with a group in Kings Heath, where we just shared some of the things that we found work and some of our top tips. And I think we'd be quite happy to do that with other groups around the city. So particularly if there were, say, residents who had come together and wanted to do some activities, but they perhaps needed some ideas around what kind of activities might be possible, or some ways of how to do that. I think we'd be happy to kind of mentor them and share some ideas from our perspective. Fab.
Really nice to see you again, Rob. Thank you.
Nice to see you too, Hamira.
Yeah, Rob kind of formally left the FPA programme in May because of our contract with Whitton Lodge had ended, but I'm really glad that you've come back to this meeting. So, and Natalie, lovely to meet you, Natalie. I don't think we met last time.
Hi, no, I believe it was one of my colleagues that attended. I've only just started in the role, so all quite new to me, but I have been caught up in it all. Anyway, from an RSPB's perspective, in terms of our physical presence, the closest spot we have is Samuel Valley, which is obviously a bit of a way from Highgate Park. However, At the moment, we've not been particularly active in the area, but we have just secured funds and are looking to kind of build our presence basically in terms of community engagement and empowerment, and working more with kind of younger communities, more diverse communities and everything. So I think at the moment it'd be very much kind of watch this space, but 6 months from now we'll potentially be in a very different position and really keen to kind of work more closely on this kind of stuff with you guys. So yeah, and basically very much along the same lines as what Gareth has kind of described. It's similar kind of opportunities that we could kind of offer and present moving forward in terms of kind of mentoring and training. Citizen science could come into it if need be, kind of green champions, this type of thing. So a whole variety, and that could be, as I say, Sandwell Valley, obviously a bit of a trek from the centre of Birmingham, but we will be kind of widening that geographic area as well. That's great for me.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for kind of chipping in there and being really forthcoming. It's really, I mean, and also quite a range is being offered there as well, and that's the point of this jigsaw. Would, you know, all the pieces look different, and you all bring a different set of expertise, a different set of skills, a different set of experience, and you know, and that's what makes this a really, I think, really exciting, because no one organisation is the same here. But hope what we try to do is complement all of you in terms of what the offer is, and so yeah, that's great. Made some really good notes there on kind of what this offer could look like. Already I'm visualising Highgate Park being quite different to what it currently is, which is great. I'm just gonna whiz through the rest of this. So we've talked about what could we do if there's no money available, okay, but we do know there is some money available. So we have 150k, and again, a big thank you to the Commonwealth Games team who've worked really hard with us to kind of get this in place. It's a one-off sum, but it doesn't. The way in which I'm hoping we'll be able to use it will mean it doesn't stay a one-off sum. So the way in which we've kind of thought about it is, could we divide this fund into thirds? So we have 1/3 that we keep back and invest into future activity, most likely to tackle another 4 wards. So, and I'm not an expert in funding bids, but I know Bosworth know a group that absolutely are. And again, with my friends at Park Hat on, we've just benefited from £10,000 in Swanshurst Park by working with Bosworth, who have reached out to get grants. And that's, you know, it's fantastic where we are. This is how we're buying our notice boards. You know, it's because we've worked with an organisation who have got links with people with some excellent bid writing skills. We were discussing with Councillor Shea this week, actually, early this week. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. It feels like a long time ago. That, you know, bid writing, getting funds, it's not easy. It's a skill that you have to hone and hone and hone, and you have to do enough of it to get better at it. So why could we not keep 1/3 back? We know roughly, so what we're working on at the moment is a menu of opportunities that we think would need to be available to a range of different parks and open spaces to help them move through the basic, better, best. So that 50k could go towards, by the time we get to the end of Christmas this year, the plan is to actually have worked up what the menu opportunities are for another 4 wards, to be able to then paint the picture of actually what the level of investment might be needed to support this vision, our red to our red wards into green. So let's say we put a 50k away to reinvest. And with the experience that Bosworth have got, Emma, please, and Chris, I think Chris has joined us now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're on about, from a 10k investment, on about 90,000 in terms of what's come back from the bids. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, 90k, so to just short of 100. So that's a 9-fold increase from that 10,000 seed fund, which is fantastic. So thinking about the here and now, we could use 50,000 towards people initiatives. So Emma talked about activation. Actually, another 30 still pending. Brill. Okay, so it could be even more than 10 times what we originally put in that we get back. Some of that 50k could go towards in terms of people initiatives, so things that encourage people to use the park. So it's this is where maybe an activator, we could look at employing that, and actually we've got the funds to do that. This could be about getting some resources to be able to incentivize maybe some groups to start thinking about using the park. I'm not sure. We could work out the the actual detail later. And then another 50k in terms of the actual place. So could we use that money to buy a notice board, for instance, for that park? They're about 250 quid. They're not a large amount of money. Yes, absolutely, Councillor Chatfield. Need to link into the CSR agenda, absolutely, and social value and procurement. So are there businesses, again, and this is where the officer group for environmental justice in the council, we would have somebody from procurement or from skills training, excuse me, losing my voice, would be kind of saying to them, we need your help to identify those businesses in that area to be able to target them. What other things, could that, based on the EJ audit, could that site benefit from a sensory garden, for instance? I was admiring the sensory garden in Perry Common at one of our parks meetups recently. It blew my mind, completely blew my mind. What was, not only is Perry Hall, sorry, not Perry Common, not only is it already a fantastic park, but what that sensory garden offered was just so different to other elements of that open space. And again, I think once we have an activator in that space, and it could be a volunteer activator as well. So going back to the original conversation that we started off about the importance of volunteering, do we have somebody in post whose job it is to find those activators? And this is kind of a model that we're really keen to develop, a bit like the voluntary model that we have in National Trust. You have volunteer managers. You have volunteers who actually do some of the jobs potentially that we might also have paid staff to do. But there's something there really for us to think about, and we're working up that model as we speak at the moment. So yeah, so that is some of the thinking around this, and we're going to be having a live poll later to be able to kind of get some more thoughts from you on that. Does anybody have any initial comments from what I've just said about the funding? Especially Hannah as well from Commonwealth Games. Is especially if anything that you're concerned about here, because obviously we need to spend the money in the way that the Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund also is acceptable to that as well. So so I've got Chris's hand up. Emma, I'm sorry, I've just noticed, I'm not sure if your hand is a legacy hand, but again, if you want to come in after Chris, please do. Hi, Chris. See you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I was late on. It's just a clarification, really. Are we talking citywide or are we talking specific wards?
So at the moment, this would be a focus on a ward by ward basis, Chris, I would say. So absolutely. So if we could turn that 50k into 500, then immediately we have another pot that we could start to be looking at for other wards as well. And there's nothing to say that we need to look at 100, that we need to look at 50k, 100k just for Borsey and Highgate at all. That doesn't necessarily, we don't have to do that either. But definitely I would say it's a ward by ward basis. We're trying to do things differently because we trying to do Birmingham as a whole city, I understand why, because we have 1.2 million residents, and by starting somewhere else first, it feels as though others are going to miss out. But equally, we're at risk of not being able to do anything, I think, if we do it across the city. So, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Hannah, did you want to come in, obviously, as our Commonwealth Games kind of link? Is there anything that you've heard talked about kind of funding? Because I know it's really important that we have a plan to spend this money, given that we've got it now. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
I think it's making good progress, and you're obviously creating a model that could then be extended, funding dependent to other wards, which is obviously important because, as you said, we can't be seen to sort of just be focusing on one area. So I think if it's positioned that we can get traction to then expand, that's a good a good route to take. I mean, as you know, Hamira, we sort of need to move forward over the next, well, I suppose over the summer, to get definitive plans and then outputs aligned to that. And obviously this is moving in the right direction. So I think it's just as you get a bit more flesh on the bones, we can then start to define exactly what will be delivered. And Kat and I are obviously happy with what's happening at the moment, but there is a hard stop on this, and we do have to have everything kind of sorted by about September time.
Brilliant. That's great. That's super. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay,
folks. So Tamsin, I'm conscious I have really badly chaired this and we're 15 minutes over and you should have been finishing by now. So I'm going to bring in Tamsin now, who's going to just take us through some of the governance-y type stuff that people asked a lot of questions about last time, about an alliance, a round table, how are they different and so forth. I'm not sure we're probably going to have a lot of time to really get into the detail of this, and I suggest for those of you who are still interested, and we're not going to lose at the end of this, we'll come back to revisiting it. But if I can ask you to spend about 10 minutes, Tamsin, on the next few slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Hamira. Hello, everybody. So I am Tamsin. I'm a fundraising consultant and I'm working with Casey for the Future Parks Accelerator team at the moment. And I've had the pleasure of working with Hamira and her team on some of this stuff, which was really good. So I'm going to, just for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm just going to zoom you out of detail to thinking about bigger picture stuff and ways of working. And I want to think about how we can get from where we are now to delivering the City of Nature vision, and really think about what the best vehicle for delivery is, and just thinking back to Hamira's puzzle really, and the completeness of that. So we've reflected on all your feedback very much for that, and you know, we're keen to move things forward as well within the Future Parks Accelerator programme, because that draws to a close in March next year. And as we've just heard from Hannah as well, we've got the legacy of the Commonwealth Games, the timing of that to factor in as well. So we're keen to kind of hit the ground running really with some of these kind of concepts. And what I want to look at just really briefly is a couple of things. A round table, the idea of putting together a City of Nature round table, and the idea of putting together a City of Nature alliance. So I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide and we'll look at what these two things are, and then we'll think about what they might look like for the City of Nature. So so here we go. Hamira and I love this image. So a round table is really stakeholders coming together for discussion, where no one has a precedence, there's no hierarchy, it's very, very informal, it's really all about collaboration. And if we move on to the next slide, we'll just have a little look at what an alliance is. So slightly different in that an alliance does have a bit more formality to it, is a bit more of a formal structure. It's still about collaboration, but it's really about mutual benefit and it's about common purpose. So collaborators coming together to deliver something tangible with real purpose. And I just kind of found these principles online actually, and I just thought they were quite interesting to include. So you might want to reflect on these a little bit, but it really draws on the importance of ways of working, around having shared values, around not forgetting sort of internal stakeholders within our organisations, you know, and making sure that we give time to that, as well as bringing external partners together. So that's the sort of definitions of both of those things. So if I just move on to my final slide, it's really thinking about yeah, what a round table might look like for the City of Nature, and what an alliance might look like as well. So if you think about the round table potentially being the first phase, so wider stakeholders coming together to kind of facilitate strategic discussions, aligning existing activity to get stuff done across the city. And actually it's fascinating listening to you all. There's so much going on already. this roundtable could be relatively quick, straightforward to set up. There might be existing structures and groups that might fit neatly into it. There's some questions really there that we can discuss in a minute. But I think the other thing that the roundtable could really bottom out and shape up what the more formal alliance needs to look like. So moving on to what the more formal alliance could look like, this really should be a bit more of a tight-knit group, so a fewer select partners that come together to form this alliance, bringing expertise, bringing specialisms in a really tight-knit way to really focus in on specific kind of areas of work. And actually what you've been talking about, the sort of ward by ward approach, I think would work really, really well with this, and then the long-term kind of benefits and opportunities that might come from that. It's probably going to need some sort of governance-y type structure, so maybe a board with representatives from each of the select partners, or on the board. There are considerations around administration, who leads on what, the finance, the funding, the fundraising, who's going to take a lead on that, what the role is for Birmingham City Council, the parks, all of that still needs to be bottomed out and thought through. But I think in the conversations I've had with Hamira, I think there are some really thorny issues that need to be tackled here, and I think that's really where the alliance can really get its teeth stuck in, working across a few select partners to really kind of make some progress and invest in some medium to longer term impact. That's all I wanted to say, actually, Hamira. So we've got a bit of a poll now, and there's still lots of questions around this. There's still lots to be bottomed out. But yeah, thanks for listening, and back to you, Hamira.
Gosh, I wish I could be as succinct as you, Tamsin. So thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions about what Tamsin's just said? I know, again, we've given you a lot of information here in a short space of time. So in terms, do people feel clear about how an alliance is different to a round table? Just if I just pause for a few seconds to get any clarifications. Okay. If I just quickly revisit this slide that Tamsin shared, we're looking to act quite quickly, as I said before. So this isn't about kind of thinking about doing something in the next 12 months. It's about really, we're in July now, and I would really like to be able to this month say, right, okay, well, I think potentially we haven't got all partners around the table at all. There are so many other organisations, for instance, Canals and River Trust aren't here today, but play a really crucial part in terms of nature. So, but again, going back to the mantra of FPA, perfection is an enemy of progress. We can't wait to have everybody around the table to be able to start something. So I just want to kind of really impress the point about we're keen to do very soon, rather than kind of just keep thinking. Emma, you've asked me to share this slide, so I'm not sure if I can do a screenshot while I'm presenting, but this is kind of the way in which the alliance is working. It is very much about collaboration, and absolutely, Emma, this is exactly why Tamsin included it, because we want to use it as a way to go forward. So again, if people feel comfortable with using this as a starting point, then we can start drafting absolutely what an MOU might look like based on that from an alliance. So yeah, absolutely, everything's going to go out after this. We'll put the recording of this onto YouTube for people to access as well, and also get the slides shared out and so forth as well. So we've actually kind of made up a fair bit of time thanks to the succinctness of Tamsin, so thank you again. Let's get on to the poll, folks, and I'm just going to quickly take you through the key questions. So it's quite easy to go round and round in circles, no pun intended, in terms of kind of, is this the right thing to do or not? So we thought, right, we're going to be really direct and ask you some questions outright. And a big thank you to Debbie, who sorted out a live poll for us today. So we want to really know about, do you know what, what's your view about the roundtable and the alliance? Should we have both of them? I've got my own view on this, and Debbie has, and Tamsin. And it's now in the chat as well. So if I could encourage people to copy and paste what's in the chat if you can. Google Chrome probably works better than Internet Explorer, but it does work in IE as well. We want to get a sense from whether you agree with us about how we think the two things are different, the roundtable and the alliance. We've got a strong view in FPA about the Park Service. You know, we absolutely feel that the Park Service has to be driving this as well. What the Park Service do is such an important job for our parks and open spaces. I'm not sure what Debbie's put onto the live poll. Debbie, have we got a range of answers? I'm sure she will have done.
I was being mean and going for a agree or disagree.
So I can see why Debbie's done that, because we're trying to get people to kind of where does your, if you're unsure, is it you're more unsure because of you're not sure it's the right thing to do, or you're unsure, yes, in principle it is the right thing but need a bit more information. So okay. So we also want to get a really clear sense from you folks as well about the idea of volunteers as green champions.
Can I just say, Hamir, if there's anything that we could clarify now, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe not, but as we've got a little bit of time, if there's anything we can clarify.
We've got time to do that. Really great shout, Debbie, thank you. If I just kind of go through the questions quickly first, then we can go back and revisit any that people aren't sure about. So Debbie's done a fantastic presentation about volunteering and how our vision for volunteering is changing. We're not at all suggesting that volunteers don't work with particular organisations, but actually we know that volunteers, what drives them is their interest in nature. So, but because we're not working as a system at the moment, we're not in a position to be able to share information because we don't allow for that, or GDPR doesn't allow for it, or we're not explicitly asking people if we can share their information. We're only going to grow the Green Champion Network as if we have an army of people. And we do have a small army of people, but we don't know very much about them as in its entirety. So there's some questions here about a central database. What that looks like, we've still got to work that out, but in principle, do you think we should have somewhere that we have a database that records who all our volunteers are, what motivates them? This is what the Google form refers to is a database. What the demographics are, what kind of volunteering do they currently do, and what would they be interested in finding more about? So, for instance, I'm just thinking of an example. When we set up as a Friends of Park group, we had big ambitions to become like Cottridge one day, and I know that's been 25 years in the making, Emma. So I might not be here for that. That might be time. It kind of, if we were going to get to some of that level, we'd probably need way more volunteers probably than we currently have access to in our Friends of Park group. There might not even be Friends of Park group people that want to join a Friends of Park group, but they might want to volunteer in a different way. We also talk about, and what I've also included here as a bit of a test is a link to the WhatsApp group that Debbie mentioned. We've got 19 people on there now in less than 24 hours since it was just sent out to Friends of Park groups. And also I think Boss have put it onto social media. So we've had 19 people respond in that short amount of time. What if every organisation here who's got access to volunteers, could you all commit to getting that WhatsApp group out to all your volunteers, for instance, and to see what the response is? Because what we're trying again to create is this idea that yes, people are volunteers, but what they're championing is they're championing green and nature. And actually, there could be some really interesting exchanges and support and opportunities being shared, which we might not otherwise be able to do so easily. And then the last question really is around kind of, are people comfortable with that split around the fundraising? Sorry, around the 150k into those 1/3 chunks. I say fundraising, it probably is more seed funding, I should probably say, folks, and apologies for getting that semantic slightly wrong. But seed kind of seed, corn, place, people. So Emma, I think I know you popped in the chat, you're struggling a bit in terms of being able to kind of give a clear answer. So I think we'd be really happy for you to kind of respond to this separately if you feel that, you know, it's just a bit too yeah, kind of black and white. So very happy for that not to, yeah, for you to kind of answer that separately if you want to send us, and you know, we'll send these all around afterwards and you can kind of respond to us via email, or we can have a phone call or even meet in a park to have the conversation. But do other people feel broadly okay with what the questions are asking? Does anybody want to clarify anything? I should probably say that the central database as well, it could be, so sorry, if we look at questions 4 and 5, so again, Chris, we did the section on Track It before you came, so, but thank you so much for sharing those slides, and Emma did a great job at talking us through them, and we recognise that the Track It app has been one way to actually bring a lot of information into one place, which was really positive. So, you know, it doesn't have to be the Track It app that we take forward, but given it is working and people are using it and reporting that it's usable, you know, I'd be really keen for us to find a way of taking it further. But the question here is more about that we, rather than it being Track It, that we need to find one way for all green champions to record their volunteering time, and that one way, again, taking on Emma's point that there isn't always just one way to do it, but I guess the question really is about one main way. The database could be also an app as well. It doesn't have to be separate. It just really depends on whether all the questions that you'd want on a database, like the ones that I just talked through, could actually be also answered on an app as well. So, but let's try the poll, shall we, folks, and then see what people say. Oh, Chris, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I kind of agree with Emma that the yes and no answers to some of these are quite difficult without having a bit more idea of plans. The one thing I would ask, as you and I discussed yesterday afternoon, Hamira, is around the database and particularly volunteering responses, and many people, as a generalization, but many people who volunteer are people who are potentially searching for work, out of work, or not in work, shall we say. And I think we need to be very cautious about where a database would be held, in terms of people's willingness to put information in it. And certainly, you know, going back 10 years, personal experience, when I was out of work, I had benefit sanctions imposed because I was volunteering and couldn't attend an appointment. And I think there are a lot of people potentially out there who do volunteer, who wouldn't be particularly happy about information going into a council-held database, for example, because they would be afraid that, not that it would, but they would be afraid that their information would go elsewhere within the general system, and I think that would really impact on potentially people signing up to it. And I think we just need to be really cautious with that one in particular.
And I think absolutely we'll need to work through all this stuff, Chris, but given that this is a City of Nature Alliance, there's no reason why, in terms of you you know, we have had one organisation say they'd really like to play a key role in terms of helping us to develop an integrated kind of volunteering kind of way of working. So again, we need to get permission to share who that is and so forth, but we're really keen to to follow that up. So at the moment, I'd say don't worry about the detail, which I know is really difficult because that is going to affect the answer, but it's yeah, if that helps. But absolutely, if it is a yes, then we'd have to find the right way of doing it, and I can't see any issue given that they're citizens and they're volunteering for green spaces, why it couldn't be a green space organisation that holds that database. So with all the right privileges and kind of, you know, data restrictions and everything in place. So Gareth, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, around the like a green champions database or coordinated volunteer thing. I think the way to approach it in a way is to kind of really work out what you need it to do, you know, and if you've kind of, you know, because if it's more about a tool to kind of reach out to different volunteers in different spaces, then it, you know, it has a certain orientation. Or if it's a way of capturing some of the volunteering that we know is happening, but it's kind of going under the radar, you might approach it in a slightly different way. So and I think, you know, as Debbie was saying, in a way that there's quite a lot of different formats for that volunteering. You know, there's the traditional kind of, you come, or maybe in the conservation world anyway, there's sort of traditional come along and volunteer, you know, for a day or part of a day and kind of get your hands dirty. But then there's kind of all the other types of volunteering, and probably it just needs sort of a real clarity on what use we want to get from that database, and you know, how it would be accessed and how it would be used, and then that can help to then shape, you know, what details might go on it or that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's, yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more discussion to be had for this, Gareth. You're absolutely right. There's just a couple of points in the chat about leaving the poll open until the end of the week. And so for anybody who feels that kind of they're not ready to kind of answer these questions, we're very happy to kind of take that now. But it would be really helpful, I think, just to get a bit of a sense of those who are more comfortable in kind of giving their thoughts today. Debbie, do you want to? Is the poll open? I've just clicked onto it, but it's kind of just whirring at the moment.
Yeah, it's open, and as far as I know, well, I'm getting replies back. I'll try and
then I think
I'll try and share it. I haven't used poll everywhere for a while, and that's what we're using. Let me see if I can share it.
If I just go off sharing, then Debbie, that'd probably be helpful. Oh.
Yeah. Oh.
Ah, there we go.
Is that? Can you see that?
Yeah.
I can't see it now. That's one of the weird things of Teams for me. But you can see that. So if we start with that one, we haven't got. Oh no, one's 100% at the moment. So I'll just go down them. I won't make comments. I'll let you look at them first. So what's interesting is that's the only one that we've got 100% on at the moment, but you can see people are still thinking and adding to it because they're still going up and down.
Okay.
So.
Where people have disagreed, without feeling like you're being put on the spot, it would be really helpful to know, because there is no right or wrong answer here, folks. We're all just trying to work this out as we go along, I think is fair to say. Where you have disagreed with what we've put forward, if people would be comfortable in sharing where you feel the issue is, because you haven't got enough information or what have you, that would be really helpful. And if I was to choose one, especially around the funding breakup as I've described. I know it can be quite hard because the polls are anonymous, which allows you to perhaps be a bit more honest.
I'll admit that I put a disagree for the funding one, and I got as much as anything just because I felt like I needed a bit more information. So it wasn't that I necessarily disagreed, it was more that I just needed more info.
Thanks for being so brave, Natalie.
That's right.
But anybody else who felt that they disagreed with anything want to kind of share why that is? This would be so much easier if we were kind of like in a room together and, you know, rather than on a screen. Oh, this one's changing quite a bit, isn't it? It was it's definitely kind of creeping up the proportion disagreeing. Maybe someone's changing their mind a little bit. Did you want to come? Oh, Councillor Chatfield, I just seen your hand go up.
So I think there was someone else first as well, so I didn't spot who it was. I don't want to jump in the queue. Gareth, I think, had his hand up as well.
Thank you. Gareth, do you want to come in?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I was the thing that I wasn't so sure about. I think it just reflected the function of the Green Champions database, and just, you know, whether the so I think there needs to be you need to have a coordinated system. It needs to be simple, but I think it's just the exact function of it, and whether collating the aggregate hours is the key thing that we want to get out of it, really. So it wasn't a disagreement with the idea of having a single streamlined bit of software. It was more just the needing to test the premise a bit more about whether that's the most valuable thing to use the database for.
Yeah. Before I bring you in, Councillor Chatfield, if I could just have a follow-on question to Emma and Chris before I bring you in. I promise I won't forget you. Just Emma and Chris, just in terms of the Track It app, can it be used as a database? So once people are registered, could you use it then as a way to say, right, we want to get a message out, you know, Swanshurst Park needs 1,000 volunteers today to sort out a massive issue.
We used it to send the WhatsApp group information round.
Ah!
So we were able to email everybody and say, here's a WhatsApp group. So
and
yes.
That would be why we haven't just got chairs or WhatsApp or friends.
We would never have sent it just to chairs.
No.
Because not all the groups work that way. So, and also sometimes information gets as far as the chair and no further. So that's not helpful. So yes, we could use that, and I'm sure any other version we use would have the same process. But the kind of, I mean, one, I have a lot of problems with the use of the language army for a start. You know, yes, you can put out general calls, but you have to be very careful how you put out a general call. And, you know, I'm not sure that's necessarily how we would be working, but we can advertise opportunities through a contact database. Absolutely. And I'm sure all the other organisations that who are on the call who organise those sorts of events would, you know, we would want fairly carefully targeted ways of doing that rather than scattergun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which, yeah. I think one of the questions on the Google form was that what would you like to be informed about? So yeah, okay.
I think that's quite key in terms of the detail. When we get into that detail, is what do we communicate with potential volunteers about, and it's great to offer new volunteering opportunities to anybody who's already interested in a particular type of volunteering, but carefully thought through messaging in terms of who gets what, I think is quite important, because the downside to that is that people will just switch off if they're getting 1,000,001 volunteering opportunities every week. So I think, but within the detail, that's something that's absolutely within the detail.
Real. Thank you. Councillor Chatfield, can I bring you in before we finish?
Yeah, so I just quick, first of all, just on those last couple of I thought very interesting points. One of them was around, I suppose my interpretation of the app was it more to do with making contact with people and building that network than it was to do with collecting data back? Because I think the risk of collecting, I think obviously we need data, we need information, but I'm not sure it's going to tell us a huge amount more than we don't already know. And I think there's a danger of just endlessly mapping and endlessly knowing things, when actually what you need to do is crack on and generate new activity and recruit new people into it. And the other point is that just on the detail of the app, I think that's important, is that cascading. So it's whether an individual might be interested in volunteering opportunities within their particular locality. But who made the point now, you're absolutely right. No one's going to want to get bombarded with messages about volunteering in Kings Norton if they live in Sutton Coldfield. It just winds people up and you end up losing people. But just the point I was going to make, I was going to come back to around something. I think the language sometimes just around the word round table, I think suggests something quite time limited, as in you do a round table and then everyone goes home. And then it also, to me, sounds very conversational. I know that's the original intention, but it really doesn't sound like a doing thing. And I think that's where I want to be clear about what the intention of this is, because to me, a round table does sound a little bit like you get a few people to wise heads together and have a chat. And I think we're looking for a lot more than that. So I think it may just be a language thing, but I don't want just the word round table to cloud people's perceptions about what this group is about, because I'm not sure it's the right terminology.
That's a really helpful challenge, Councillor Chatfield. And I think we have struggled a little bit with kind of finding the right way to describe it. And when I first started this conversation, it absolutely is not about just talking. And if that's the impression it's giving, then I think we can go back and revisit that. And actually, is it just that we have an alliance and we call it an alliance, and actually, but there are some key people within that alliance who take on some really, challenging roles that need sorting out, and other people play a more contributory role rather than a leadership role. We talked about that on Friday afternoon a lot, didn't we, as well, Tamsin, that actually we don't necessarily need to have two. So yeah, we can definitely work on that. Councillor O'Shea.
Yes, just to jump in, I'm all for minimising meetings. So maybe there's room for whatever you want to term the main body, which is open to a wide group, and then perhaps a smaller executive group that can work a bit more on direction. So that perhaps an open round table for groups across the city to join, and something slightly narrower for any decision-making process. Just put that out there, rather than having two distinct bodies. So one could be formed from the other. And also to agree that I think it's unlikely we'll get volunteers working at more than one park, unless they happen to have a park very close by. People work and think very locally. I mean, it isn't a bad thing. It's just how people are. The number of people who will work across the city or even across a small area, like an electoral ward, they aren't very many that will do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I take that challenge as well, and I think I guess there's even the fact that we have multiple groups potentially even working in the same location, but not necessarily the volunteers know that. So I'm just trying to think, for instance, if Birmingham Trees for Life were to advertise maybe something in Swanshurst Park, our Friends of Park groups, I'm not sure whether we're there yet in terms of thinking, well, actually we've got an existing membership, and actually, what we could try and work with those existing Friends of Parks to kind of also get new members and things as well. But I absolutely hear. I'm not at all expecting that we'd use this database to get volunteers who live in, you know, the south of the city to go and work in the north. Absolutely. Birmingham's way too big for that. But I think it's more about, I think, making people aware of just how much there is.
Sorry, Hamira, I can't access anything else to put my hand up or put anything in the chat
sorry,
while I'm
Debbie.
sharing this screen. But I'd just say, when it comes to tree planting and tree wardens, that doesn't actually ring true. If you do send out a request, people come from all over the city.
Okay.
They're not necessarily signed up to a group volunteers. They're just people who want to come and do something on that day. So I think there is this spectrum of people that we're perhaps not always considering if we don't look at all the different volunteering models. And I don't think one thing will capture anybody, but I would say, as I say, when it comes to tree planting, well, people come from all over the country actually to tree plant, not just all over Birmingham. We get people from London coming up to tree plant as well.
I know Emma's put in the chat about volunteering and community engagement. It's absolutely, but I think people's motivations for volunteering as well. You know.
Sorry, I pressed return too fast on that one before I got the chance to edit it. So I think the really important bit about, or for me, the really important bit about volunteering is not what you're doing, it's who you're doing it with and where you're doing it. And the really important bit is that it makes you feel part of a community. It makes you feel that you belong somewhere. And I just, you know, I absolutely agree. People do definitely travel all sorts of places. And, you know, they volunteer in all sorts of places for things that they're passionate about. But we're talking specifically here about open spaces. And people tend to be attached to the one that's, as Councillor O'Shea said, the one that's on their doorstep or in their neighbourhood, or the one they walk through on the way to school. And I think, you know, that's not wrong, that's not bad, but for this kind of volunteering, being as local as possible is important. And, you know, the idea that people are getting into cars and driving to Birmingham to plant trees is, I have to say, faintly horrific. You know, we shouldn't be doing that. We should not be busing people across the city or driving people all over the place. We should be encouraging them to walk, to do stuff on their doorsteps. And in that way, all the health benefits that you get from volunteering, mentally and physically, are maximised. So, yeah, and there are lots of different models and lots of different ways, but particularly with open spaces, being as local as possible is important.
Yeah, I think we could probably argue, well, not argue, we're not arguing, we could discuss the points of a database, kind of, there's so many elements to this. But I think if we also go back to our City of Nature vision that we're developing at the moment, one of the basic things that we're struggling with is actually just knowing who our volunteers are and how much it reflects our community. And we're not going to get that unless we have a more, I guess, a better way of collecting that data. We might decide not to do anything with that information in terms of anything active, possibly. But I think it's definitely something that we have to look at, you know, to make sure that, because we know how important volunteering is for health and well-being, and just by looking at what we've currently got a taste of from the Track It app, it's not capturing as many community people, as many of our citizens as it should be. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest drivers of actually getting a decent database in place. But I'm conscious it's 7 minutes past 3. I think we've still got quite a bit of work to do, folks, but I think we have made some huge progress in terms of some of the thinking and some of how the model might look for this. I'm just, the last slide that I've got for the presentation, really, there's only 3 bullet points, really. We need to really get to a point at now my PowerPoint decides to crash. We need to really just understand who's in or out, really, in terms of taking whatever we decide to call it, roundtable, alliance, if it is just an alliance, who wants to play more of a contributory, there it is, who wants to play more of a contribution, and who actually wants to take more of a leadership role around some of the key things that we need to happen as part of being a City of Nature Alliance. So we'll do some work on that later this month, myself and Debbie, on trying to unpick that. I've also said that we really need to have an action plan in terms of Borsley and Highgate. We've got some initial things that people are able to have said that they'd be interested in doing, so we need to find a way of making that happen. So again, Debbie and I will take that back as an action and see if we can make that into something more tangible. And then we also need to really get a sense of who wants to take on a leadership role within the City of Nature Alliance in terms of fundraising, in terms of volunteering, that kind of element, communication. So yes, absolutely. And we already are doing that, Councillor Chatfield, absolutely. But yes, we'll need to do some more with that as well. So that's, I think, is the next steps. And I will need to talk with Debbie, I think, really about when we next plan a conversation around this. But hopefully by then we should be in a much better position to be able to have a much more of a formulated plan. And yes, Emma, absolutely. We need to be really clear about what the data is, what we're going to be doing with it. Absolutely. So I almost feel like a specification is needed for the database that we need to kind of put around this particular group to kind of get some initial thoughts. So yeah. I know we've gone over, and thank you for your patience, folks. It's been a lot to get through in one sitting, and massive thank you as well again to Debbie and Tamsin for all their work on this. So we'll get everything out, folks, recordings and paperwork, and we'll be in touch about the next conversation when hopefully we'll have a plan to share with you about some action. So, okay, thank you everyone, and hopefully we'll see you folks soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.